Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and today is Halloween here in the United States and probably in other parts of the world. So it is my favorite holiday because I get to wear fun costumes. And I thought I'd wear this construction hat today, at least for a little bit, to talk about because we're building a whole new world with this new technology like generative AI. So I figured I'd pull up my construction hat. But let's move on to more serious things here. So feel free to wear your costumes today. But I wanted to talk about and take on this continue this theme around Halloween and talk about the scary parts of generative AI. And so I'd love for you to share where you're coming from today and what scares you most about generative AI. And in particular, what are the things that you worry about, think about? And I'll share some really interesting examples about why it is so scary, because I do want to temper the enthusiasm, the optimism, all of the hype that's out there around generative AI with some realism around what's happening, but also want to talk about how we anticipate to deal with it. And also some of the things that governments are doing, things that individuals are doing, and also what companies themselves are doing to try to anticipate these worst case scenarios. So please share where you're coming from and also just share with me what are the things that you are most concerned about, terrified about, scared about with generative AI. And I've been hearing from people over the past week, and I have some of those examples here today, and and see what's going on. So, Jay, great to see you again. And I love what Jay says. What scares me the most is all of the hype that's going on with generative AI. And Jay, would love for you to share a little bit more about that. But I think one concern I have is that people think it is hype, that it is a fad, and that they're overselling it. And we're setting unrealistic expectations of what it can do. Or we're so overselling that people just look at this and go, oh, yet not another shiny object that we have to go chasing after. And do we take it seriously? And frankly, it's all hype, so maybe we can just ignore it for the time being. So yes, there's one of the things that I will talk about a little bit is how timing. Is it too early? Are we too late? The things that are scaring us is like, when should we be jumping in? And so I'll be talking about that a little bit. But I think some of the other things I want to talk about are, first of all, just some of the really big doomsday scenarios. We're talking Skynet, Terminator, AI is going to take over the world. And the general consensus is right now that we're pretty far from that because it's far from being and anything at the point where it can do that. But when we have things like autonomous agents coming on board, where these tools now can run automatically without a human involved, now that's starting to get a little concerned. People are starting to get a little concerned. So I think the fact that we are looking at these worst case scenarios, that we're thinking about them, is a really good sign because it means that we're starting to take precautions to say what can go wrong possibly, and how do we think about ethically and responsibly to go through and make sure that these things actually don't happen. So Jay just gives a little bit more insight into what he's talking about. Yes, let's take it seriously. But I've been around the block too many times with these new technologies. I'm waiting for the hype cycle to go bust and real business examples to show up. Jay, it's such a great point. And I think one of the mitigations of this particular scary scenario is to come up with real business use cases. I was speaking with some CIOs, and it was interesting. And I did a recent survey. I'm still finalizing the data, but it showed that a lot of the CIOs at medium and large companies are still not doing anything. They're feeling very frozen in time, not sure what to believe, what to do, and waiting for these real business cases to show up. We'll talk about that over the next few weeks about how to make that justification, how to talk to CIOs, how to talk to your chief revenue officers, if you have those, your sales teams, about some of the real ways that you can use generative AI today that are, in many ways, these no regret moves that you can take. And being aware of all the downsides, which we'll talk about today, but also take advantages of the things too that can be really good. So let me get into this. One of the biggest concerns people have is the malicious use of generative AI, in particular to create fake content and deep fakes, creating forged documents, creating misinformation. And there's a lot of concerns that we're going to have some security risks around this too as well. So, for example, how do you know it's a real person or not? And it's become so incredibly easy to do this. I thought I'd show you a deep fake that I made of myself. And so let me just get into this for a second here. So what I did was I first of all went into my private GPT. I just uploaded a bunch of content. I'm going to talk. I'm still testing, so it's not quite ready for daytime, for debut. But I just went into it, and I went into my Shar GPT, and I asked it to actually create me a script explaining about the power of generative AI, because I was giving a presentation last week, and I wanted to just create this video for them. And so we created the video. It's a little bit long, so I asked it to just cut it down to 15 seconds, and this looked pretty good. Okay, so I figured I'd use this script, but because my again, I'm trying to create a deep fake video for this audience to show them how easy it is. But what's interesting about this audience is that they are Japanese executives here in the US for a visit. So I went over to ChatGPT and said I took that script and had it translated into Japanese. And then I went over to this one site called 11 Labs. And what it could do, I had uploaded a voice clip of myself, a 5 minute snippet from one of my live streams. So publicly available audio of me talking. And I put it into Voice Lab. It generated a voice of me. And then I put in the text from ChatGPT and it created this. And so I thought I would go through. Let me find the page. I have too many things located here. I'm just going to play it, and so you can hear what it sounds like. Oop, that's actually the Chinese version. I'm going to go look for the other version. This is the problem with having too many tabs. Here is the Japanese version. AI による未来へようこそ。この技術は、your in創造性を民主化し、産業を工名化し、so that's my voice speaking Japanese from that script. And I don't know how to speak Japanese. And again, this was just a very short clip of one of these live streams. So nothing really extensive. And in many in cases, again, if I were to actually do a really good rendition of my voice, I would do a very specific reading of 30 minutes that would generate all the sounds needed for all the different languages that I could possibly want to have it in. And I was curious about doing this because oftentimes I'm speaking in front of audiences where English is not their native language. So I wanted to see how good is this technology now. And I've been speaking to some people, as some of you know, I'm writing a book, and I want to create the audiobook. And the technology is there now, where if I read, some of that language, I could potentially have my audio book read by me aloud using these generative tools, and potentially have it translated using tools like 11 Labs into any language that I want. So this was pretty incredible. I thought this was already pretty amazing, but then I also wanted to put it into a video. So I went to another site called d-id.com. And if you are interested in these slides, let me just put that up here. And I have this other new thing now. You can also use a QR code up here in the corner and also get the slides that way. And I've also posted into the comments so you can get them. But if somebody can repost on LinkedIn, because I can't post from StreamYard into LinkedIn for various reasons. So this is the deep fake. I uploaded a headshot of myself, again, readily available anywhere. And I went and created this deep fake. So let me switch screens here and I'll play this for you. Okay, let me push. generative AI による未来へようこそ。この技術は、your in 創造性を民主化し、産業を工名化し、誰でもコンテンツを生成することを可能にしています。AI が魅力的なビジュアル So you can see you can tell it's fake. But at the same time, I'm using very publicly available content of myself. This took about, once I had it all set up, it took about 5 minutes to actually create the text, translate it, create the audio, and then create the video. So it's super fast and super easy to create this. And again, you can get the slides, including the audio and the video embedded in it, so you can actually see how this works. Again, at this, I'm sorry, the URL is a bit messed up here. Um, at the slides here. Let me just fix that really quickly. This is what happens when you're doing things super fast. And I'll show that. Okay, this is the correct URL. It says bit.ly slash CLI dash deepfake. And one of the things that I find so interesting about this, it is super, super easy, again, to create all of this. I'm curious about what you think about this. Is it amazing? I think it's amazing. I was showing it to some people over the weekend. It's amazing what you can do, but also at the same time is absolutely terrifying that this is possible. So some of the things around this is how do you understand what is real, what is not, especially in this generative AI space where so many of the things that you can do and have are created so easily, so simply. Again, I don't know any technology. I am not a coder by any means. These are just sites where I just cut and paste content, upload pictures and audio files, and I'm able to create things like this. So, one of the things that we often talk about are just some basic ways to protect yourself if you're thinking that there might be deepfakes used against you. There are code words you can use to verify that somebody is a legitimate person if they're talking to you on the phone, because these technologies now can do this on the fly. I'm actually playing with this to not only be able to create avatars of myself giving full speeches in another language customized for an audience, but to also potentially do real-time Q&A against my database of content, my Shard GPT, to be able to do this in real time and provide answers in the way that I would normally think about these things. Again, using the equivalent of my brain and my content that's already there. So the ways that you can tell if somebody's calling you, understand if it's a deep fake or not, ask them to cough, ask them to sing something. These are things that AI deepfakes are not necessarily trained to do, um, or just insist on an in-person meeting. But there are some new technologies. I was recently talking to a company called Abnormal AI, and they do security to understand when something is a phishing attempt coming in through email, because these technologies again are so good at emulating a conversation and the voice. They understand this was the language that you would use to be able to deepfake you. So it's understanding behavior patterns. Is it normal for this friend of yours to be calling up and asking and emailing for money? Probably not. So it's going to put in some extra security and encourage you to take a look and make sure that and notify you that this could be a spam email, a call, or a video. So those kinds of malicious uses, I think, are a real consideration. I just want to see what else we have here. I have a comment from another. I see a couple other people coming here. We have Jason Thomas coming in from Mumbai. So great to see you, Jason. Alan C coming in from Phoenix, and we also have somebody commenting on something that I was commenting on before about CIOs. Argue that business cases that some CIOs are waiting for already here, right in front of them. I propose we need a different mental framework or model to see the applicability of general AI. So I agree with you. I talked about this, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago, about how CIOs are thinking about the world. And they're looking at generative AI as if it's an enterprise technology rather than this transformative force that pretty much anybody can get access to without the CIO's permission. And so the CIOs, I often find this like, what are the use cases? How do I justify paying $30 a month per user to Microsoft for Copilot? And I think they're missing the bigger picture, which is to say there are some tasks, some roles where this is such a no-brainer in terms of the productivity, the quality of work environment and satisfaction that can happen if you are giving people these types of tools. So we need to be thinking about this discussion in a different way. Again, we'll be talking a little bit more about that over the next few weeks, about how to make that business case and use case. I want to go on and talk a little. Let's see. I have a couple more comments here. Um, let's see. I'll come back to another comment about regulation in just a second after I go through some of these things, because I think regulation is a really good interesting way to be thinking about this. Um, a couple other security issues. Well, actually, it's more about this ability of generative AI to create a lot of content. And so there's concerns that it's going to deepen the information bubbles that we live in because we're going to get so much more information that's tailored to how we want to see the world, the political, societal, marketing information that appeals to us personally. And that could become very dangerous because it could isolate us from diverse viewpoints and sources. But in some ways, we're going to be happier inside that bubble. And that also can lead to automated disinformation campaigns. As someone put, it's one thing for people to put out this information, but now to have it tailored to feeding into your fears and anxieties about the world, to have it tailored by anybody in the world where English isn't even their native language to be able to target you. It's going to be happening at a massive scale. We're already seeing that a lot with the political happenings today. We're going to see it ramped up with the US election cycles and other election cycles we're seeing. And it's just going to be harder and harder to discern what is true and what is false. We have that issue already today. So, media literacy, understanding when things are being generated, and it's incredibly difficult to detect text that's generated by generative AI. A little easier with the photos and the art and graphics that are being created, and right now fairly easy to discern if a video is created by AI or not. But it's going to get harder and harder to do this as the technology gets better and better, which means that the fact that we are aware of information being misused or deep fakes being created, the more we are aware of it, the more we're going to be looking out for that and having a discerning eye to understand what's really out there. There are concerns around privacy, identity theft, the use of our private and personal information without our consent and having it used in these models to generate content. So we're seeing the large models giving us much more control about what's being fed into the model and what's not. And also potentially could, if you're too much of your information gets out there, it could lead to harassment, biases, and discrimination happening against you. Bias and discrimination is one of those nightmare scenarios, again, that there could be biases built into the data. And the fact that we are looking for that and understanding that and trying to root that out, a basic example is if I ask for a picture of doctors in an operating room, they will tend to be male and white because that's where a lot of the pictures of doctors look like. They're male and white. So it's perpetuating biases that we already have built into our culture. So the remedy here is to define what does fair look like? How should a doctor be rendered? In what context and what situation? When we're making decisions using data, how can we ensure that it's not biased one way or the other and unfairly? And one of the hardest things here is to define what does fair look like? What does it mean to be fair? And so running tests alongside humans with the AI, and we know that humans can also be flawed. And so understanding where the differences are and having transparency and explainability in that process too as well. And then there's issues like the loss of jobs. What's acceptable, what is not? And then also issues around timing. And a lot of this comes down to many of the things that are happening on regulation. So good timing for Jay's comment here. Regulation often in the US and the EU are trying to micromanage, create a barrage of rules and bureaucracy and manage them. Need to focus on intertwining, looking at incentives to develop on boundaries and protect our community. So I agree that Tristan Harris has a lot of good content here around the Center for Humane Technology, and it's very appropriate that I think it was yesterday when the White House put out its guidelines for AI and has made a call, put out an executive order for the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. And so reading through this, it's pretty good. It's pulling out a lot of the things and the principles by which AI should be developed. And then it lays out over the next 90, 180, 270 days that various departments and agencies are going to come up with guidelines. And to Jay's point, there is some concern that these guidelines are going to be really micromanaging, for example, reporting when you're acquiring these technologies and to what end. And so we're trying to find that sweet spot right now with the regulations and the compliance requirements for organizations to say that we are doing the right ethical and responsible things to make sure that people are protected with their information, that deep fakes aren't being used, that our data and our technologies aren't being manipulated for malicious uses. So these kinds of activities are being done right now in the United States by the federal government, by the states, by the European Union with the AI EU AI Act. A lot of initials there, but the AI Act been moving and been approved in Europe, and China has its own set of regulations too as well. So this is all happening right now to address a lot of these biggest concerns. And so the thing that I really want to get across here is that in so many ways, what we're looking at is the ability for us to anticipate all of these things and being able to understand what is really important, what is not. How do we understand these threats and these barriers, and also what are the steps we need to take today to really understand what is most important to do, what's not important to do, the things that we don't have to pay as much attention to because it's not a threat today. I think of all of these, the biggest ones are inside the organization to take the steps to make sure that, again, I like to say play defense, to make sure that the data and information that you have is being used in the right way, that it isn't getting out, that you're protecting that. It's the top priority. And then being able to ensure that people across the organization are using AI in a thoughtful and understandable way. All right, I'm just adding a little bit of content in here because I just realized it isn't happening. All right. Sorry, it's a little bit discombobulated today because I'm running so many different screens here. So that's what I have for today. Let me just check the comments to see if there's anything else. By all means, please let me know if you have any questions about this. Happy to go through. And I'll be writing this all up in my LinkedIn newsletter this Friday. And I'll put in more details about how I created the deepfake, just to give a lot more details into how that actually was done. That's what I have for today. Thank you for joining, and I would love to again continue the content conversation. Love for you to share how you are coming across these issues, the concerns you have about the nightmare scenarios, and how you're starting to think about mitigating these risks. So next week, on November 7th, at the usual time, Tuesday at 9 a.m., I'm going to be talking about the knowing, doing, and leading gap. I recently just came back from Harvard Business School, and one of the big things we talk about there is the difference, the knowing and doing gap. So you know what you have to do, but you don't actually do it. And so we'll talk about how that is showing up with generative AI. And I think there's also another aspect of this, which is very important to this conversation because we are leaders creating all this change. It's the knowing, doing, and leading gap when it comes to generative AI. So tune in for that, and we'll be talking more about how we actually go through and make that happen. So thank you again so much for joining today. Happy Halloween. Stay safe out there today. And I will see you next week. Thanks.